All right. Ralph Velasco, you are at least, among other things, a podcaster, writer, traveler, photographer, and content creator. Thank you for being here today. How much time do you spend on content creation these days?
Oh, probably 2 hours a day, I would imagine, on average. Just depends on the day and if I'm traveling or what. But I was 1 to 2 hours a day.
When did you start doing the podcasting?
Well, I've podcasted on and off for many years. I've had my own podcast that I had a podcast I was sharing with someone until about 3 years ago. Kind of pandemic hit, and so I come and go with podcasts. But I've been guest or having my own podcast for probably 15 years.
Wow. Well, how'd you determine the format for your podcast?
Initially, it was mostly about photography. So it was about bringing on other photographers that could provide different viewpoints about photography and different topics that we would talk about. So it was more of a, bring on a guest to get their insight on different photography topics.
How long have you been doing the photography thing then?
Professionally, for coming up on 16 years now, but I've always been interested in photography. But it was kind of the dawn of digital photography that really kicked it to another level. I think, like a lot of people.
Yeah, that digital film is a lot cheaper than the 35 millimeter for sure.
Yeah.
When you were, did you always do the travel photography when you, before the digital, or is that what kind of got you interested more in the picture taking when you were traveling?
No, I've always been interested in travel photography, but definitely with digital photography. And I saw an opportunity to perhaps teach people how to use their new digital devices when digital photography first sort of came out in the early 2000s. And so that's when I started seriously thinking about how I could perhaps monetize teaching travel photography and creating trips with that in mind.
Did you do that through a different business or just start your own business with that?
No, I started my own business pretty much from the beginning. I have run some tours for other companies, but not anymore. So now I just run all my own trips.
Is that small group or you do large group ones?
Small groups, anywhere from 6 to 10 people typically.
What are your most memorable or favorite? Do you do recurring trips or you try to keep doing something different to keep yourself excited in it too?
Yeah, I try to mix in maybe 1 or 2 new trips a year, although I'm kind of backing off on that a little bit too. But I do about 8 to 10, 12 trips a year with groups. And so I rotate them out over 30 itineraries that I've created over the years. And so, but lately I'm just interested in maybe 1 new trip a year. So this year uh, I did Antarctica. And so that was a really very, very interesting place for me. And that, did kind of spark my interest. And, it's because I do go back to places over and over again. And I enjoy a lot about returning to places, seeing old friends and trying to make trips better a year. But I also need to be, stimulated by new destinations as well. So I try to keep my interest in there too, and get my clients to come back, many of whom have been on 15, even 20, 25 of my trips. And so I'm all trying to create new trips to keep their interest as well.
What do you think the draw for people is for a smaller group trip versus the large ones?
Well, certainly, just the size of the group allows us to use smaller vehicles, stay in more boutique type hotels, have meals at more local type restaurants as opposed to the big groups I've seen. They need a specific type of hotel. When you've got 50 people just in your group, you need a fairly large hotel. You need restaurants that can handle those size groups. So you're going to lose a lot of the the local feel to it. And so that's something I've always wanted to be a part of my trips. It does make the trips more expensive. So if someone's to compare my trips to some 50-person tour and mine are 10, they're going to find my trips are quite a bit more expensive. But there's so many benefits to having a smaller group. Like I said, we can get in smaller villages, restaurants, hotels, and have a much more locals type experience as opposed to trying to get 50 people through, I don't know, some tourist site or into some local person's business or house, which I'd like to do. Get inside people's homes, learn how they work and live, and that's would be very difficult to do with larger groups.
What do you recommend for your people going on the trips to pack as light as possible? Do they have it would seem to be easier to not deal with carry-ons, but now that sometimes you'll get them.
Yeah, no, I would like to carry on as much as possible, but I'm traveling sometimes for 2 months at a time. And so, yeah, I could pack, and typically you pack for maybe 10 or 14 days and you just rotate clothes. But I don't like to wear the same shirt for 2 months or the same one pair of shoes, so I like to have a little variety. And so I tend to check a bag. But some trips I definitely recommend having shorter, that are typically of shorter duration. Like I'm leaving for Cuba tomorrow, and that's a much easier place to just carry on, not have to worry about baggage getting lost. And so it's just a lot easier. The other thing is with traveling for a longer period of time, I like to have a Swiss Army knife with me or cuticle scissors. And as soon as you do that, you can't, carry on. You've got to check a bag. So it's little things like that that determine that. But
What
I
kind
do
of
recommend that carry on when possible. It's just so much easier. I've in the 15, 16 years I've been doing this full time, I've probably lost one bag in 12 or 13 years, and then 3 in the last 2 years. So it seems to be getting worse with airlines losing bags. Just happened to me on the last trip, and so the more you can keep your stuff with you all the time, the less it's going to happen that's going to get lost or stolen.
Yeah. We recently went on a trip with National Geographic to Peru and Ecuador, and we managed to put everything into our bags and be less than 25 pounds on a carry-on, one carry-on each, which worked out well from going when I think the biggest problem with that is going from mainland Ecuador to the Galapagos. Those planes are smaller, but they're not as small as I thought they would be. They're express jet or bigger size. So we had a lot of people in the group that had the carry-ons or the check bags, but it's just easier getting on and off the boat and everything too with just the carry-on. Plus, I find it a little easier on your mind because you're not worried about going through all the lines and everything to check your bags, and then going through customs everywhere is a little easier, maybe.
No, it very much depends on where you're going, how long you're going for, what type of activities you'll be doing there. I've got Antarctica, or I just returned from Finnish and Swedish Lapland last week, and there you need perhaps big boots, jackets, things like that are going to fill up a carry-on bag very quickly. Although on those trips, we actually provide the boots on both trips. And on the Lapland trip, we provide the whole snowsuit, which, right there would pick up a carry-on bag on their own. For Antarctica, we do bring our own suits, but they provide the boot, which is a really nice service.
Is that a vapor barrier boot or just like a insulated hiking?
Very heavy duty hiking boot they are. Um, so it's something that they provide in Antarctica, especially. And there's different solutions that you have to walk in before you get off the boat and onto land, and then before you get back on the boat from land, so that you're not contaminating either one with foreign, objects or diseases.
Did you go to Antarctica through South America and then boat across, or did you go a different, like fly into that area that's deeper into Antarctica?
Yeah, so we flew in and we flew to King George Island, which is less 2 hour flight from Punta Arenas, Chile. So we don't go through Argentina, we go through Chile. And it's less than a 2 hour flight, save about 2.5 days sailing each way on the Drake Passage, which is notoriously rough and can be a lot of seasickness. And well, one of the gentlemen on my trip this last February that we went, he it was actually his second attempt to go down, because on his first trip a year or two ago, someone actually died across the Drake Passage. From what I understand, he was walking through the hallway on the ship one day, and the waves were so big he just got knocked against the wall and got a head injury, and they had to cancel the whole trip. So that stuff
Oh,
does happen. And so I think the flying down, although it can be more expensive, it's such a luxury, and I would think a lot safer in the end.
did you get to see the entrance to the Hollow Earth and pyramids buried under the ice, or different stuff in Antarctica than that?
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, oh, okay. You
Yeah.
gotta check out Operation High Jump, I think is the name of it. That at the end of World War II, there was a battle group, U.S. battle group that went down there to Antarctica chasing allegedly a Nazi or a German Nazi, whatever squadron of ships, because they live inside the Hollow Earth. That's a little bit more out there theory about aliens and such, but
Okay.
I'm just wondering what they're doing down there in Antarctica.
Didn't see that.
Oh, different tour, huh? Okay. All right. Next
I
time.
guess. Yeah.
How do you determine what camera equipment to take when you're traveling? As far as do you just use the smaller things like your phone, or are you using different camera bodies and the longer lenses?
I'm shooting a lot more for my YouTube channel, and so I'm typically just shooting with my iPhone. I've got a gimbal, good sound equipment, and that's all I'm shooting with. And I knew if I was going to do a YouTube channel, I was going to have to take it easy on myself. I certainly didn't want to carry more gear. I was always a one body, one lens shooter, which can be somewhat limiting on one end, but it's much more freeing on the other end. So when it comes to photography, everything's a trade-off. And so I feel very good with having just my smartphone, gimbal. It shoots in 4K, and I can do slow motion, time lapses, etc. And so it allows me to do a lot more things and with a lot less gear. So I'm much more likely to want to shoot it than to have to set up, have big setups and things like that. So
Yeah.
that's the way I look at it. But there's always a trade-off.
Do you look for, or do you plan on scenes when you know the places you're going and you think, okay, I want to get a shot from here and here and here and here? Or are you making the decisions just out in the wild as the time goes?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually created an iPhone app about 14 years ago, and it was called 52 Categories of a Shot List. It's called My Shot List for Travel, and it was 52 categories of a shot list. And so it was mostly for photography, but it was meant to give you an idea of what to be on the lookout for in a place. Just like, you may have heard that concept shot list before.
Mhm.
And so that's, it comes from the film industry where they need a list of shots that they need to get to in order to create the film. So it's kind of the same thing where these are things that you need to be aware of to be on the lookout for, because the more you know what you're looking for, the more you're likely to see it when it occurs. And so I'm a big believer in that. But I also believe in spontaneity and just being ready for something that pops up and an opportunity that happens out of the blue, and to try to be ready for it right then and there too.
I found a lot of times with my traveling and photography that you'll see the shot that you want, but then by the time you're ready to take the picture, it's done. So then you have to start developing this sense of, like, if you're driving into Denver and you see the city, you're actually driving down into it coming from a certain direction, and you see it and you're like, okay, I feel like this is going to be good in a second. Like the light is going to converge. I'm going to get a good scene here. That you have to have that photography sense of the shot is coming up, and then get ready to take it. And then you're ready when you need to be, rather than if you see the picture that you want and you think, wow, this is a great picture. I found now that it's better to just observe what you can in the moment, because you're not going to be able to get the camera out. And even if you're just using your phone, the moment is going to pass for that perfect picture. But you can go ahead and try to get the, slightly less than perfect picture if you want. But what is your experience with timing?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's all about timing and anticipation, depending on the scene. If you're in a marketplace, somewhere that's moving, crowds, street scenes, those are places where it's always good to have a sense of timing, anticipation. Perhaps you found a really cool background that you want to catch that person walking across or whatever, and kind of sitting there like a spider waiting for a fly to come into his web, anticipating that shot and what you hope to be walking into the scene. Um, and sometimes it doesn't happen, but being ready is extremely important. Like you say, especially for travel photography, fast moving photography, where that decisive moment is a split second. If there's one split second that it's going to happen, and you're just like bringing up your camera and looking at the settings, changing dials and buttons, that moment's gone.
Yeah.
So having your camera in what I call a point and shoot mode, which means having it right for for that situation, whatever it is, being ready, anticipating that moment, and then just click. All you have to do is hit that button. And maybe it's shooting continuously and getting 5 or 6 shots to get those feet in the right position or right against that background, or so there's a lot more that goes into it than a lot of people think when it comes to anticipation. But the more you do it, just like anything else, the better you get at it.
Yeah. What are some of the things that for you, make a good picture, that you try to look for those elements? Or is it more of just observing when you're out there? Or is it both sometimes?
Yeah, it's certainly a bit of both, but it always depends on the picture, of course. We there's pictures that I love that are very simple and might just be a person against a clear background, or there's very what we might call busy pictures where there's a lot going on and your eyes going from place to place with the photograph. That can always be good too. So kind of the viewer's attention is sort of wrapped in that picture longer than if it's just a real simple picture. But I think both can be just as powerful. I probably lean more towards a simple picture. I also like environmental portraits. So that's typically the picture of a person, but then there's something in the background or foreground showing the environment that the person's a part of that's telling a lot more of the story. Because you could take a picture of the most interesting Bedouin camel herder's face and head, but if it's just the face and head, that could be taken anywhere. But if you zoom out a little bit or move your perspective, and now there's a camel walking across a sand dune in the background, man, that just pretty much tells you everything. So again,
When
it's
you're
always yeah.
when you're looking to take pictures, are you more times than not looking to tell a story with the picture?
Yeah, I think as photographers, we are storytellers. That's the first thing that we are. So trying to when I shoot, I'm trying to bring images that convey the feeling that I had when I was in that place. And one of the things I get from students and clients a lot is, man, I was in this place, I took this shot, and it just isn't, conveying what I saw there. And my theory is that, a picture is just a two-dimensional piece of paper or, on your screen. But what about the breeze that you were feeling, or the smells in the air, or the sounds of the honking cars, and, all those other five senses that you were feeling at the time that you were taking the shot, but now you're trying to convey all that in a two-dimensional picture. So don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't quite come across like that.
Yeah, you got to know the limits of what a picture can take. It's kind of like if you go out and you see a bright moon that looks bigger just because of the way the atmosphere is, and you're like, wow, that would be a good picture. But if I'm just taking it with my phone, it's not going to be much of a picture. So maybe you take a few just to have it, but understand that it's in the moment is where you're getting everything from. So you got to know the limits. Like taking a picture of the Grand Canyon, it's not going to do the same thing it does for standing there. I don't think I've seen any picture that ever did the same for that.
For sure.
Do you have things that you like to take pictures of? Like for me, traveling, I like old barns, old structures, motorcycles for some reason at different places, different countries, and then like trash corrals. I really like. I need to do a book about that one day, but just different places where dumpsters are kept. I don't know. You got anything weird like that?
Yeah, I do. And I call those themes. So, having a theme in mind, I recommend that to my clients. And some themes are ongoing, like maybe your trash dumpster theme. Whenever you see one that's interesting, you'll take a picture of it and kind of add it to your little portfolio of that topic. And for me, it's sewer covers, which are about the most basic thing that you can imagine. But especially in Europe and Eastern Europe, they're beautiful. And they've got the name of the city on them. They've got some, ornate design. They're in a different language. They might be in a different alphabet. And those are things that you're never going to see anywhere else in the world. It says Bratislava or Budapest, or I was just in Stockholm, and they had ones there that said Stockholm on them. If you go to New York City or Venice Beach, California, you'll see they say "Made in India." And so I joke I'm a connoisseur covers, and I just think that they're interesting, and they're very unique, and only be seen in those places. But I also like I've got an ongoing theme called people reading newspapers, and
Nice.
yeah, and that's something that is going away. As I think I'm gonna have to change it to people reading TikTok feeds on their phone, you know, reading the Wall Street Journal on their iPad. But yeah, it's something that I just started taking some pictures of. One day, I remember it started in Nepal, Kathmandu, Nepal, and I started taking these really nice pictures of people reading newspapers. And then, of course, if you take them on the same day, everyone's reading the same edition of the newspaper, which is kind of cool. And then more and more places that I would go to. And now I always mention that. And the next time I'm out with my people, they're like, "Hey, Ralph, did you see this guy reading a newspaper over here?" And you start to have this in your head. Now I'm going to start, thinking about the trash containers that you're talking about, because the more you know what you're looking for, the more you'll recognize it when you see it.
Yeah, it goes back to your shot list. The sewer covers and just different covers that are embedded in the road. Sometimes mileposts that are embedded in there. I like Seattle's sewer covers because it has like an overhead view of the city in the sewer cover, which is interesting.
Yeah,
And then I
that's
always
cool.
note when places have the foundry names in their US foundries. I think that's cool. But yeah, I call that street jewelry. I had to take pictures of those too. And my
That's
wife's
right.
like, "What are you doing? What are you doing over there?" I was like, "Well, it's a great manhole cover there. I got to get a picture of." And she said,
Yeah, everyone thinks I'm crazy. They especially think I'm crazy when I walk around puddles. Every time a decent sized
"Oh
puddle,
yeah,
I'll walk around it and see if there's a reflection that I could show a different perspective of play somehow reflected in this puddle. And 90% of the time there's nothing, but those 10% can really make for a unique shot that maybe no one else saw.
yeah, that's nice." And it's not going to be there forever. It's those
That's
things
right.
that the common observation, but it just goes by because you got other things going on. I like the people reading newspapers. Maybe I would broaden that to just people reading is what you'll probably have to
Mhm.
do. So somebody looking at graffiti on a wall, somebody looking at a parking ticket, all kinds of things.
That's,
And then people
that's
drinking and people with animals, whether it's a
yeah,
bird that's just in the picture with them, a squirrel maybe in the distance, or, dogs are nice too. But yeah,
yeah, yeah.
exciting
Right.
world of photography.
Mhm.
Yeah, the trash bin thing, I don't understand why I like that so much, but there're just so many different types of trash corrals, I call them. And
Yeah.
then the one thing that's good I find about taking the pictures on the iPhone or a phone that has the GPS on it is you don't have to worry about writing down where you are. You're going to have that. If you ever make a coffee table book about trash corrals, then you have the location there and you just have to remember, oh, this was Providence, Rhode Island, or this was, the Badlands of North Dakota. And it's,
Right. Right.
I
I had
think
one
that's the,
client that, yeah, we were in India and she wanted to go to landfills and see the
hmm,
people working there, and these people that make a living off of going through trash piles. And
hmm.
so we arranged for her to go with a guide to the local landfill and get these photographs that she wanted, but that was her theme. So a theme can be just about anything.
Wow. Yeah, I think those ship breaking yards in India would be something to get some pictures of just because it's the beauty of the water and then just the destruction going on. And you're like, wow,
uh,
it's like the opposing sides of that.
for sure.
For travel, are there places that you think or that you look at that you're like, I would go there or I would have gone there in the past that you won't go anymore? And how do you determine how the safety of your group versus the safety of you on your own?
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously much more concerned about being with a group than I am by myself, but I'm still very conservative for myself, of course. But one place that I always want to go to that I don't think I'll get to now is Syria. And that's been, just decimated by the war there. And so, most of the things that I wanted to see are probably gone. Same kind of things happening in Ukraine. I was supposed to scout Ukraine, I guess, 2 years ago to bring groups there, but then the war happened not long after that. And
Mm,
so that's probably out of the question, at least for a while. But it's typically, war zones, places like that, where it's just unsafe. Um, I go to a lot of countries where you can't drink the water, and that's not that big a deal. But when I'm with a group, it's an extra concern for me. Are people going to get sick because they did drink the water, or we didn't give them enough bottled water, didn't warn them, and it's just things that are pretty obvious, but that when you think about traveling with a group, I have a different mind space about it. So water would be one of those things.
Is there a specific, if you just had to ask one question of a place you were going to travel, like or a society or whatever, to figure out if it was going to be safe for you? Or I think usually how I ask this question is there one question that you would ask of a society to determine its morality? But I'd also, the same instance is there one question you would ask of yourself to determine if it was safe for you to go there? You got any questions like that? I can share a couple of what I've heard from other people.
I mean, it just, and not having really thought about it this way, but perhaps would I bring my mother to this place? Is it safe
Nice.
enough that I want to bring my mother to that place, or a close family member, or an older family member? What are some of the things you've heard?
The one that I use is, how do they treat women? And that doesn't mean that you're only concerned with how women are treated, but I mean, if a place treats women poorly, it's probably not going to do good for men as well. But I think
Yeah,
I think that's a good one. And then
for
I've heard
sure.
other people say, how do they treat their prisoners? How do they treat older people? And then another question I've heard recently is, you would just ask that society the question, what is the one question they would ask to determine if their society is safe? That one's a little trickier because you got to talk to somebody there. So you're already there before you ask. But yeah, it's one of those, maybe it's more of asking yourself that question about a place to see what you know about it. Like, are you going to have to cover your head, or are women going to have to cover their hair when they walk around in public? Because that's not something you have to deal with here in the US. So then what's going to happen to you as the person with them if you try to, stand up for them if they're not covering their hair, and should they have to cover their hair and all those things? That's one of the questions I started thinking about more, not just in the military, but after that, if I thought about visiting places with my family. I like yours of, would I bring my mother there, or somebody I care about? And
Yeah.
then recently going to Peru and Ecuador, because Ecuador has some places where they don't advise people to go, Americans to go especially. So
Mhm.
I don't know. It's reality might be different than what you feel like it's going to be, but I did find that Ecuador had some scary parts, and Peru had some. The poverty there was more of the issue, and I don't necessarily think if you have poverty you're going to have higher crime, but I mean it can correlate some places.
Yeah, that's true.
Hmm. Do you think that the creative source for visual art, like whatever works in your mind or your eye, that you see something and you find it artistic, that comes from the same place as writing?
I would say so. I mean, that creativity overall probably comes from the same place. I'm not that familiar with, right and left and brains and stuff like that, but I would think that the creativity comes from a similar place. I got to think there are different kinds of creativity. One's visual, the other's sort of more thinking and writing down thoughts. And I've a lot of respect for people that write novels and very detailed books like that. And with photography, I mean, I think there's definitely skill to photography, but to me, it's a lot easier than painting, something like that, writing, where we're kind of just clicking a shutter. And I don't mean to demean it in any way, because it's definitely an art form, and some people are better at it than others. But I think it's an art form that can be taught. I'm often asked if I feel that a photographic eye is something that can be taught, or you have to be born with it. And I think it's nice to be born with it, but I definitely think it can be taught as well.
Yeah, there are those. You can definitely look at pictures and say, this is a person that doesn't take good pictures versus this is a person that does. And I guess you can break that down into elements of the border, the picture telling the story. Does the subject have space? Are they walking into or out of the picture? All those classic things of what makes a picture attractive to people. But then I think there's other times where you just have a picture and you're like, oh, I think it brings the attention more to it, kind of like your puddle thing, where it's not something people normally see. Like if you're taking a picture of cobblestone or a section of cobblestone on a street or a wall, the way a plant is growing into it or just the way it looks on its own, I would call that theme more of like a screensaver type theme, where you're getting a close-up view of something that you would normally just walk by and not appreciate the smaller pieces in. I think that's interesting to be able to bring somebody's attention to that through photography. And you can do it in writing too, if you make people think about those things. But what's your experience with dealing with different types of photographic effects, whether it's panoramic or macro, micro lenses?
Yeah, that's another reason that I like the smartphones, is because you've got slow motion capability, time lapse, which I try to take both of those depending on the scene, so that I can add a variety of video to the videos that I'm creating. But panorama, that capability on a smartphone is great. I mean, there's been scenes where, boy, I just can't get this all in one shot. But now, if I do a panorama of it, it can really turn out very, very neat and interesting. So I'm all for using the capabilities that our devices are giving us, and taking advantage of those. Even some of the auto features on the bigger cameras that I typically shot in aperture priority, where I would choose the aperture because I wanted to determine the depth of field, and let the camera tell me what the shutter speed should be to get the correct exposure. Um, I'm all for letting the camera do its work using auto ISO, things like that, um, auto white balance. Let the camera do a lot of the work, and all I have to do is think about recognizing that photo opportunity and pointing it in the right place
Hmm.
and timing it right.
Yeah, it seems like with the effects now too, you can change a lot of that stuff after the picture. So if you let the camera do the work, then there's all kinds of things you can do after.
For sure. If you're
What's your
shooting in raw, especially. Yep.
what's your view on the after effects of photos? You like those? You glad they exist but don't use them? What do you got on that?
Yeah. It's obviously a very individual choice. I've never been someone that spent a whole lot of time on my images. I used to take a lot. I do 12 trips a year, take 5,000 shots a trip, and that's 60,000 shots right there. And just keeping up with that is, very difficult. I would just do very quick kind of cleaning up of shots. always trying to get it right in camera, which no one teaches you to do. Work from the garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. So getting the best shot in camera, and then only have to make some minor tweaks to it before presenting it. And typically, I would shoot raw, so you almost always have to do some post processing, but it doesn't have to be a lot. And it just kind of makes those images pop. And so I just people that want to spend a full day on one image to get it just the way they want it, great. It's just not my style.
Yeah, so they're interesting to look at. It just seems like it's not real. It's not what you would see in the regular world. So I just wonder at what point it becomes more of a type of painting versus photography, that you're just using effects to do it. Not
Yeah,
that
I
I'm
mean that's
saying it's bad, but
yeah, it's kind of the age-old question, and it's up. I suppose it's up to every person. But the thing that I try to be clear about is that I'm not going to tell you I didn't work on a shot when I did, or I add something to it. I would feel compelled to tell you, oh yeah, that moon wasn't really there. That's from another shot in another place, and I just copied and pasted it in there or something. I've never really done that. I've experimented with it a few times, but to me, I love just being in the right place at the right time, and getting being there when that moon was there, and lucky enough to have captured it correctly, or planning a trip around that moon being there for whatever reason, or going to see the northern lights like I just did. But not and it's great if someone wants to create those pictures, but um, my opinion is that we probably shouldn't pass those off as something that was there when it wasn't. I mean, I think there's a lot of skill in creating that picture as opposed to just photographing it, but it's just all opinion, I suppose.
how do you deal with keeping track or storing your photos?
Yeah, I've got a Drobo, which is a RAID system at home, and it's got about 24 terabytes of space in it. I think I've got an average of 6 4 terabyte drives in it. The Library of Congress is 4 terabytes, last I heard. So it's a lot of space. But so I try to put everything there. Um, I keep as much as I can on my computer, so I have some things with me if I want to work on them. But since I'm shooting more with my iPhone and doing a lot more video, I'm not accumulating those 5,000 pictures per trip. I'm now accumulating a lot of video per trip, but that's a different way of looking at things when you shoot video versus photographs, and it's also a way of post processing and editing. So that's changed over the past few years that I've now had this YouTube channel and shooting a lot more video.
What kind of programs do you use for editing your videos for your YouTube?
Well, I've hired a couple of guys over the years to do the heavy lifting. In the past, I used a movie, basic program like that, because I wanted to learn how to speak the language so that I could talk to someone intelligently about creating my videos. And people can't pull things over on me, but they're using After Effects and Premiere and things like that. But I don't know how to use those programs, to be honest. But in the past, I've used iMovie, which is a very basic version of those, and so I do let other people edit my videos. I don't enjoy that part of it.
How do you determine the length of your YouTube videos?
Yeah, I was just creating them as long as I think they needed to be. They say video should be as I forget what the saying is, as long as it needs to be and not shorter than it has to be, or something like that. But you just never know. There's no magic number. Although if you're monetized and you want to like have videos that are over 10 minutes, maybe that allows YouTube to put in an extra commercial in your video where you can make some money. So there's little things like that, but I try not. I don't let that determine how long the video should be at all. But typically, we're trying to make them just 10 minutes or so.
Hmm. Do you use where do you get your music from for the videos?
Typically, epidemic sound or sometimes things that are included in YouTube or um, but typically my editor would have a subscription to Epidemic Sound, which has got a lot of great music.
Okay. With your writing, the your 60 affirmations for travel and your 60 gratitudes for travel, how long did it take to collect those?
Yeah, so affirmations, the book is out. Gratitudes is about 80-90% done. So I'm still working on that one. But that was accumulating over probably 2 or 3 months, putting things together. I use ChatGPT to help me with the outline and some ideas, but then I put it into my own words. Um, uh, those are low content books, so they're not like novels. But the affirmations, the gratitudes will be where there's a page with a gratitude or an affirmation on it. There's a blank page for people to write their own notes. There may be coloring pages for people to doodle, some puzzles like word searches, crossword puzzles, things like that. But I imagine these as books that people could just use while they're sitting on an airplane or waiting for the bus or even sitting at their armchair in their armchair at home and thinking about travel, but trying to get inspiration for future travel. But it's also about being a mindful and intentional traveler and bringing us back to center, back to the place that we are. Speaking of Peru, I was in Peru many years ago when I was in high school. I was a volunteer down there. And the one thing that I remember from that trip was the teachers on the trip telling us to be here now because we're 16-year-old kids and we're like, I want my mother's cooking, I want my own bed, my friends and all that stuff. Just you know, bitching about every stupid little thing. And with uh, with that be here now, that really got us to think about being in that place, experiencing that place here and now. And that's kind of what I had in mind as I wrote this book was an intentional and mindful traveler and keeping in that place as opposed to being all over the place. And so that's what I had in mind when I wrote these books.
Okay. And you said it took you a couple months to get it together, or how long were you from the time you started thinking about it to your publishing time?
Yeah, probably 2 to 3 months in total. I worked on it pretty quickly. I had someone help me with the design and layout, but she didn't end up really working out. So I ended up, having to do a lot of that work myself and teaching her how to do her job and stuff. So it took a lot longer. The gratitudes book is coming along a lot more quickly because I, had made some mistakes on the first one, and so this one's zipping along a lot more quickly.
How are you doing the publishing for those?
Self-publishing on Amazon KDP. So right now, the affirmations is available on Amazon, and
What
that's
programs
done
did you
too.
use to write it?
Let's see. Like I said, I started with ChatGPT to get outline ideas, things like that. I use Google Docs for creating the words, for creating documents and writing. Um, Google spreadsheets for outlining it, make the different chapters and things like that. And then also a program that helped me with creating the actual puzzles. And I can't remember the name of that right off the top of my head, but it allowed me to create have like 15 words that I wanted to be in the crossword puzzle, and then it would create the crossword puzzle out of those words. And so that was really neat and very helpful.
Did you have a daily goal of pages to write or words
Not
to
really.
write? How did you? Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But with my schedule, and I wrote it like before I left for a Cambodia trip last year. I was in Cambodia for a month with a group and on my own. And so I'm constantly trying to write and do things outside of my group trips and being attentive to my clients, but then at night, maybe writing. So I don't have any like, I'm going to write an hour a day and I'm going to write between 8 and 9 a.m. And I just never able to keep that firm of a schedule. So I kind of slip it in when I feel like it, and eventually it gets done.
Do you have like an ideal reader or anybody you send it to before you publish it, just to see what their thoughts are on it?
Yeah, family and friends that I'll run things by. I've got a small group of usually they're clients, but they've become friends that offer to read things and give me opinions on, and so act as a little focus group, which is extremely helpful. I'm very, very lucky to have that. There are people that are in my demographic that I'm writing for, which is typically people, say, age 40 plus, that are mostly U.S. but English-speaking people from around the world, but mostly U.S. They're probably more. You got a college degree. They're on the verge of retiring if they haven't retired, so they've got more time. They have an interest in photography, although my trips themselves are not just about photography. So I get non-photographers on my trips as well. So that's kind of my demographic.
Okay. How did you get into the public speaking part?
That that was a way for me to just get in front of people that had an interest in travel and photography. Early on, my trips were more based around photography. That was my sort of unique selling point, was the photography part of it. Because I think that because I taught a course called Training, Get Paid to Travel, teaching people how to do what I do. And I said that you should have a trip with a theme, meaning, mine was about photography. Perhaps yours is about language or cooking or, spiritual yoga, whatever it is, but have that theme to work around. And then you can focus more readily on those types of people. So to your question, it was about getting in front of people that were interested in photography and travel. So it was camera clubs in the local area, adult education programs. Where I was living in Southern California, so City of Newport Beach, Santa Ana College, University of California Irvine Extension Program. So adult education, where I didn't have to have a degree to teach, but I still get in front of people that were interested in travel and photography. I spoke at the state fair. I think it was a state fair, the Orange County Fair in California. And so anything I could do to get in front of the right audience, and it could be 3 people or 300 people, I wanted to do that so people could start to get to know my personality, because I'm leading all our trips. They can, ask questions of me directly. So that's how I approach that.
How'd you prepare for your public speaking? Like when you know what group and where and how many, what are the things you put together to kind of make your message for that group?
Yeah, I almost always have a presentation, and it's almost always about photography tips, but also travel tips these days. So people want to learn. They want to go to these speaking engagements. They want to learn something come out of there with a new skill or new ideas. And so I've spoken at the travel and adventure shows throughout the United States for the past 12 or 13 years, and they do about 8 or 9 of them a year. And I'll always create a new presentation every year, where some of the speakers just use the same presentation year after year. But I always like to provide new information, updated information. Typically, I've been traveling over the course of that year before the next season starts for speaking, and I've got new trips or new photographs and video from the places I've been to. So I want to share things, and I've got new information, and the technology's changed, and the places have changed. So
How do you know or feel after a public speaking event if it went well or not? Like if it met your expectations of what you were trying to get across?
yeah, that's a good one. I don't know. I come off feeling like, okay, it went well. I spoke well, and the people laughed in the right places. They applauded in the right places. They sighed in the right places. They kind of got my drift. And if that's the case, then I did well. Also, people will come up to me after to me, asking questions, and I usually have a booth, and they can come and talk to me there. Did I sell any books? Things like that. There are a lot of different little indications that it went well.
Are there times when you're doing any of the content creation or photography that or writing that you can identify kind of like an inspiration, like a maybe a muse or maybe something that makes you feel like you're getting some good ideas for whatever you're working on?
I mean, like when in the audience, that's maybe giving me an indication that things are working.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of pick out faces in the audience, and you can tell if you're getting across to someone or resonating with people, and they're oh yeah, they're just kind of nodding their heads, or they're answering your questions silently, and so you get that feeling that, okay, this is at least that person is really getting out of this what I'm trying to get across, and that's always a great feeling.
Do you think that there is an element of creativity that is outside of yourself when you're doing anything creative? Like, do you think it's coming all from inside or what you've manifested through your experience, or do you think there's some sort of creative spirit, force, whatever, that is at times saying, "Look over here at this," or "What do you think about this?" or "Look at that person reading that magazine," or whatever?
Yeah, I think it probably all comes from within, and maybe we spin it as something that was spiritual or out of body, perhaps. Suppose it depends what you believe in, and but I think in the end, it probably all comes from within us and around us. We are what the environment around us has been for however many years we've been around, and taking all those things in, and we are what we are because of our past. And so it's probably a mix of both, just depending how you look at it.
What's the best way for people to follow your work or to see your content?
Yeah, if people like to follow what I'm doing, they can go to my website at continentaldrifter.co, and pretty much everything's there. My YouTube channel, past podcasts that I've been on and have had myself. All the trip information is there, blog posts, trying to create weekly blog posts that people can benefit from. So everything that people are looking for is now in one place. I had 3 different websites, 3 different brands, and all kinds of different social media accounts until about 9 months ago when I finally got everything under the Continental Drifter banner. And so everything's at continentaldrifter.co. And I try to be active on Facebook at Ralph Velasco and at the Continental Drifter. I have Facebook pages on Instagram at Ralph Velasco.
Okay. I think I have all those links as well. So they'll be in the show notes if people want to check them out. And I think on your website, you have links for them all as well, correct? That people
That's
can
right.
get to everything. Okay.
Yep. I'll be glad to give you a link to my book if you'd like, and we can put that up there. That'd be wonderful.
Okay. Yeah. I think I might have it, but yeah, I can add that in there
Okay.
too if I don't have it. The is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we didn't that you wanted to cover, or any thoughts in closing?
Well, I just got back from a trip to Antarctica about a month ago, and that was, we're talking about trips that kind of keep me interested, and that was the first time I'd ever been there, and it really kind of revitalized my travel because I had never been to this place. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect, and it just blew me away. And to be honest, I'm a bit jaded these days because I have traveled a fair amount and I go back to these places over and over again. But to go for the first time to a place like Antarctica was simply off the charts. And to think about being in this extremely pristine environment where there's no other man-made objects anywhere except for the ship that you're on, or the zodiacs that are moving you around. But that was quite an experience, and it was funny because people that were following me on Facebook and different services they said, God, I could just see it in your smile that you were having a blast on this trip. And that meant a lot because it wasn't just 1 or 2 people. It was like 6 or 7 people that told me over the course of a couple of weeks that I was posting. I was like, wow, there must be something to that. So I sometimes lose that a little bit in traveling as much as I do. But that really kind of gave me a kick in the pants again, was to go to a new place like that. That was really special.
Was that set up like a land base where you go on expeditions from a land place, or were you on a ship and doing expeditions off of that?
Yeah, I would imagine most of them are ship based, and then you get off the ship if the weather's right. It's all based on the weather, which we had fantastic weather. It was probably 25 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and I barely wore gloves. Jacket was open. I didn't wear sunglasses. The weather was just beautiful, and but to answer the question, you would take zodiacs either to a landing point if there was one, a natural landing point where you would get off, walk around, see some animals, things like that. Or if there wasn't a landing point, then you would just go on these zodiac expeditions and you would zip around and kind of see what you could see. And perhaps it's seals sitting on icebergs, or birds, or whatever, the penguins, whales. It was absolutely incredible.
Did you stay on the boat most of the time? Okay.
Yeah, so it was one night in Punta Arenas. Then the next morning we flew down to Antarctica, spent 5 nights on the ship, and then flew back one night in Punta Arenas and flew out. That was the base trip. But the 5 nights down there were on the ship, and this is a 67 passenger ship. So the smallest one in the industry, and one of the only ones that flies and cruises. So absolutely outstanding. The thing about it is that there's a rule or a law down there that only 100 people maximum can get off at any one landing point. So our whole ship was able to, where some ships that are, 1,000 or 2,000 people on them, they can't even get off the ship, or they have to do it in, they have to do it in segments, or rotations and stuff. So to me, that's a very different type of trip. This was so
Yeah,
intimate and true.
that the Nat Geo one we went on when we were in Peru, of course, we were on land. And then when we were in Ecuador, we went to the Galapagos, and I think we had 3 or 4 nights on a ship. And it was a smaller ship. I mean, it's a big ship. It's bigger than you would buy for yourself. But it was maybe, I think there was more crew than there were guests, but it was maybe made for 50 or 60 some. It's the National Geographic or Island or two. But for a regular person, a big ship. But for, if you put it up against a Navy vessel, it's small. But it that was the highlight of the trip for me. I mean, seeing Machu Picchu and all that in Peru, that was good. When they get that airport that is they're building now, that I think is supposed to be ready in a year or two, that's just an hour away from Machu Picchu, I think that will open it up a lot more to tourism than it already is. But that one has restrictions on how many people can go into it per day as well. But for me, the altitude, the biggest lesson I learned on the trip was altitude is a big difference. And when you're 11,000 feet up, that's something. But
Absolutely.
living on the boat and then doing the expeditions to shore from that, I did like that setup. And then the smaller group was nice, even though the smaller group is probably 50 or 60 people. It was still okay.
Yeah,
I couldn't imagine being on the big cruise ship and then to put it into my military days of merchant marine ships and Navy vessels, that it's different. It's different than that, but
for
it's
sure.
good to hear. So with Antarctica, then was the memorable part for you the nature part, or was there other things that you came away from the trip going, oh, I didn't expect that?
The people on the trip were fantastic. All the other passengers, the ship was wonderful. Like I said, it was only 67 passengers, and it probably had 30 crew. So, a good size compared to the amount of people. So I think it was the lowest person to crew ratio in the industry as well. And it was incredibly maintained, beautiful facilities. And then to be zipping around, but it was the wildlife and quietness and not seeing cell towers and fences and buildings. Everything was just pristine. And that's what really hit me, the quietness of it. Just, being able to hear whales off in the distance spouting and stuff. Just wonderful.
Wow. So I guess plans to go back then.
Oh yeah, for sure. I've already got it on the calendar for next year.
Okay. All right. So I have your links and your social media stuff, and I'll get your direct link for your book and put that in there as well. Thank you very much for your time and your insight on everything. Travel. Travel and photography. All right. Well, I will talk to you on the other side of this musical exit.
Okay.